the most brilliant, interesting people I met wear the uniform, the cloth of the nation, and people don't believe me when I say that. And the opportunity to serve with those people again, you could pick it for me. The only one I really wouldn't want to go back to is the Army, unless I can go to the 160th. But anywhere else, if you told me, hey man, you're back on the carrier in a squadron tomorrow, cool.
Hello and welcome to the Fighter Pilot Podcast. I am your host, Vincent Aiello, callsign Jello. And based on schedules and other factors, it is not always easy to find guests to join me here in the Circle Air Group studios at Gillespie Field. So once in a while, we like to repurpose our old happy hours from Patreon. These are casual discussions recorded on Zoom. So the audio and quality in the audio is not quite as good, but the discussions are great. And this week, we have another one I think you'll really enjoy. Here we go.
I don't even remember how we got connected. Did you find me? Did I find you? What happened?
I found you. I was, I'm an EMS helo pilot, and I live in Vegas and work in Yuma. So yeah, it's a 5-hour drive. So I'm always flipping through different podcasts. I saw your podcast, and then you were doing the stuff on Army Aviation. So I decided to listen. I just liked the podcast. I thought it was interesting, and I saw you. There's a couple of ones I want to go back to where you talk about certain aircraft and stuff. So I just thought it was a cool podcast. And, as I'm late to the podcast game, it's only like the last couple of years that I've really started listening to them. And, I listen to the standard stuff, Joe Rogan, stuff like that. But I like to branch out. And I saw yours, so it was kind of cool, man. Just thought it was cool. And I was, I realized my background is pretty interesting. I've had a very undistinguished military career, but it's interesting. So I thought I'd give you a shout out and see if you wanted to meet up and talk.
Absolutely. Well, I think you should probably have your own podcast, because what did you tell me on email? You're a helicopter pilot for whom?
Okay, so I served in 4 branches of the military. I flew helos in 3. So I've been a naval aviator, an Army aviator, and a pilot in the Air Force.
Okay.
For some reason, in the Air Force, they don't call themselves aviators.
Oh my goodness. All right, Yogi, let's start at the beginning. So you're getting out of high school. Where'd you go first?
No, well, I had been wanting to be in the military since as far back as I can remember. I mean, I grew up in New York in the city, and I've got a picture of me when I'm probably about 3 years old with a little airplane. I can't tell you when I started being fascinated with flying. As I got older and learned more about it, I was also pretty fascinated with the military. Was kind of a World War II buff from really early on. By 10, I could tell you every World War II aircraft, Allied, Axis, Japanese, I could tell, so I just can't tell you why. Just, how it is, something bites you when you're a little kid, and all you think about is airplanes and flying from that point on. And, got older, was, watching the Vietnam footage on the news every night, seeing helicopters. Then I was like, wait, what are those things? And started thinking those would be interesting. And I wasn't a great kid growing up, so I had a couple of bumps in the road, but I kind of knew that I wanted to be an officer. And my mom dated a guy who used to be a Marine aviator. And I was about 14, 15. He was telling me stories. And I was like, wait, they pay you for that? He was, he was just telling me. And I would, from that point on, I was kind of hooked on being a Marine aviator. And went in a platoon leaders class when I was in college. I, familiar with it. Did the 2 summers instead of the 1, which I've advised several people since that is about the dumbest thing you could ever do. Do the 1 10-week course. Don't do the 2 6-week courses, because that's just doubling the pain. But at the time I was like, well, I don't want to give up my whole summer. I can still go to the Hamptons and go to the beach in half the summer. And that was one of many dopey decisions that I've made in my life. But I've managed.
I'll start a counter here. We'll track them. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a few. And got through OCS, got my commission, graduated college, got my commission, showed up at TBS at Quantico, went through TBS, kind of excited. I didn't get poked in the eye, and everything was good. I was kind of excited about Pensacola, and they call us in O'Bannon Hall, which is the big auditorium down there. And, I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said, sucks to be you guys. We have too many pilots at both ends of the pipeline. I mean, they had, the rag was backed up for, especially on the jet side of the house, the F4 rag, and then the new, because they were still flying F4s then. And then they just had too many aviators. So what they originally told us with the air contracts was, if you keep your air contract, we'll stick you where we need you for 2 or 3 years. And then if your physical's still good and blah, 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 you'll get the flight school. And, I filled out our dream sheets, and I had orders to the 7th Truck Battalion, Camp Pendleton, California. So needless to say, I was a little depressed. One of the lieutenants in my class, his dad was a Navy admiral, worked at Navair. Right. So he just walks over to his Marine counterparts and goes, what's going on? They tell him, he goes, well, shit, we're hurting for pilots this year. Do you think any of these guys want to swap over to the Navy? And this is 1984.
For last year.
1985, 84 time frame.
All right.
And typical Marine. And don't get me wrong, I love the Marine Corps. I kind of drank the Kool-Aid, but I just laugh at this now. Typical Marine fashion. They're like, well, you might get a few guys who are interested. Sure, you can go down there and ask, blah, blah, blah. So long story short, one day they call us back in the auditorium. There's these 2 Navy 06s there. And they're basically like, look, our PTR for this year and projected in the next year, we're pretty short. And how many of you guys think you'd like to get the flight school sooner rather than later? Who'd be interested? So a bunch expressed interest, and they said, okay, we'll arrange for a mass flight physical. We'll just zero out everybody's physical. We'll take everybody's interested down to Pensacola. So we go down to, I don't know, it was probably a couple of hundred of us, because it involved 3 companies at TBS.
Okay.
So I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was a significant amount of guys with air contracts. So we all go down to Pensacola, which is the worst mistake. That's where the Marine Corps made their mistake, was allowing a bunch of lieutenants who've been cooped up in Quantico, Virginia for 6 months to go down to Pensacola. Those of us who passed our flight physical, now we've got a weekend to kill in Pensacola, right? So needless to say, by the time we get back to Quantico, everybody's like, F this, I'm in, and long story short, they worked out a drug deal. Took a couple months for the paperwork to come through, and my company graduated TBS, so I graduated. They put me in charge of the headquarters company. I was in charge of all the guys, building the shooting ranges and fixing up all the stuff out in the field. And it was great for a new officer, because these were all the guys who were in trouble. They were the blind, crippled, crazy. They try to salute me with their left hand. It was so good experience as for a young officer to kind of learn how to. I just got, my ass kicked early and kind of learned, what to get excited about, what not to get excited about, not to act like Field Marshal Rommel as a, 01, and it was good. And then one day, stand at attention. They had me my DD-214 from the Marine Corps. I sidestep over one. I raise my right hand. I swear it as a ensign in the Navy. I was at Pensacola a week later and some brand new CNTs and letting my hair grow. And it was about 100, I want to say about 150 of us made the switch. And started AI, got through AI, got to primary. I stayed at Whiting the whole time. I was at Whiting the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Primary, turned out I wasn't a natural flyer like I thought I was. I mean, I had, not to digress to my college career, which was less than stellar, but I did go to Embry-Riddle for a semester where I, had a cumulative GPA of less than 2.
Okay. That's not very good.
I did fly, and I did get about 40 hours of flight time and just shy of my private. So got to Pensacola thinking I was ahead of the game, and I really wasn't. And that I was a shitty student, and that was where being a shitty student bit me in the ass, because I failed a couple of the tests and stuff, so I was kind of under the gun early. But managed to muddle through, and when it was time for selection, and actually almost scared me, they were like, well, we're doing this quality spread thing. So we're going to take some of you guys who don't have the best grades and put you in the jet pipeline to see if they wanted to see if guys with not so great grades in primary and intermediate could be successful in the jet pipeline. And I'm like, at that point, I decided I want to be a helo pilot. So I just put helos on mine and figured they'll figure it out. Anything after that, I'm not going to complain about. I'm still here. So, and I got helos. Got through the helo pipeline. Got my wings in August of '86. Flew 53Es. Was stationed in the Philippines for 3 years, and then came back to Norfolk. Finished out in Norfolk in '91. Thought maybe I had a new kid, and I'd had 2 kids by that time, and I thought, like all guys, I don't want to deploy anymore. Maybe I should see what's out in the corporate world. Blah blah blah. Got with one of those headhunters, and I got a corporate job in New York. I'm not gonna lie, Jello. I was there 10 minutes before I realized I made a huge mistake. You know what I mean? And I couldn't get, the Navy was like, well, I was like, hey, can I come back? And they were like, actually, go after yourself. You know what I mean? Now we got plenty of, how the cycle goes.
Oh, yeah.
What's going on now in the military, and, everybody's shortage. So by the time I got out, the cycle was completely different. There was plenty of pilots. So I ended up working for a friend of mine in the theater business. And in the meantime, I shotgun paperwork to every reserve aviation unit within 100 miles. And the Army Guard came back first. So I became a warrant officer in the Army Guard flying Hueys on Long Island, which honestly was fun. It was just a lot of fun.
Oh, I bet.
You know what I mean? All these guys, all the warrants were like, all been to Vietnam, and we would brief these intricate tactical missions with the lieutenant. And then as soon as he leaves, the W3 would go, we're just going to fly down to Atlantic City and have some Chinese food. And do that. And so it was like a flying club, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, man.
And I did that for about 4 years. While working in the theater business, I would do as many extra, I'd fly 2-3 times a week plus the drills. I mean, I was loving it. And then there was an opening in the Air Guard unit out in West Hampton Beach who did combat search and rescue. And I was like, that'd be cool. And I just kind of said, hey, here's my background. Would you guys be interested? And they're like, sure. So I joined that unit, did the swap over to the Air Guard, was in that unit, and was going through an in-house training program. There weren't any slots at the schoolhouse for guys in the Guard at that time. So it was kind of going slow because I'm trying to go through basically a schoolhouse at an sort of an ad hoc thing. But I was coming along, and then an opportunity to go to the schoolhouse came up, and they said, would you want to go? And I'm like, sure. So I started going to the schoolhouse, which is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at Curlin Air Force Base. And about 3/4 of the way through, and I'm going through with active duty guys, reserve guys, the whole, and about 3/4 of the way through, one of the active duty guys is explaining to me that the assignments guy is there, the equivalent of the detailer. And he said that he heard they're short pilots on active duty. so I just grabbed the guy in the hallway and I said, "Hey, this is who I am. I'm from the New York Air Guard. What about coming on active duty?" Because after being on active duty for the schoolhouse, I was like, I kind of like putting the Zoom bag on every day, and I'm like, I kind of like being back in this environment. And so he goes, "Did your unit pay for you to go to flight school?" I'm like, "No, I gave him my background." He goes, "Okay, put in a request to come on active duty. And if your command supports it, I'll bring you on for 2 years." And my command, they were pretty supportive. The guard gets a little upset sometimes because what you get is a lot of guys come in, they start flying helos. Then they find out about an opening in a unit that has C-17s or F-16s, and they get a little bummed about that. But since I was just going back to fly the same thing, and basically it was like, look, this is just frankly, a better deal for me and my family. They were pretty supportive. Next thing I know, I'm on active duty in the Air Force, which probably the biggest culture shock of life, military, because coming from the Marine Corps and the Navy, and, you can say what you want about the Navy. The Navy's pretty real military. You know what I mean? So it was a culture shock for me. Little things like I would walk in an office and nobody, that still keep their feet on the desk and, stuff like that. And initially I used to get pissed off. I'd be like, not because I thought I was a cool guy, just it bummed me out. I'm like, you don't stand when an officer walks in the room or I remember one time, the biggest thing, I asked some guy to do something. He goes, "Sir, I don't work for you." And I just went, but I eventually calmed down and then I found out I was eligible for the bonus, the retention bonus. So I was like, and now again, another example of me not thinking things through. I'm like, sure, I'll take the bonus, whatever. But I'm in the Air Force less than a year when my first promotion board to major is. Now, I've done none of the prerequisites that the Air Force wants you to do to get to be selected for major. You have to go to PME, right? Which is mandatory before you get selected. I don't know how it is in the Navy now. You didn't have to do that stuff. It was just based on your fit reps, right?
Yep.
Of course, you have to go to PME, which I hadn't done. Then I got it done by correspondence. But then if you got it done by correspondence, it doesn't weigh as much as if you did it in residence. I had one OPR, officer performance report, which is the same as a fit rep. So basically they were like, "You got no shot." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, whatever, I'm here." And then, so I don't get promoted. Of course, now you get above the zone. That's not really going to work well for you. So now they're like, "Well, your option is, are you willing to stay a captain to 20? I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I don't care." You know what I mean? I'm like, less in my mind, I'm like, well, I guess I have less responsibility. People look at me like I'm some sort of shitbag, excuse my French, but whatever. I'll get the fly. I'm getting the bonus. It's fine. Well, then 9/11 happens. It was a big deal for me because my brother survived both World Trade Center bombs. And I worked in the World Trade Center. Matter of fact, I was a Navy. My mom was sick and I was permissive TDY for 3 months back in New York while she recovered from heart surgery. And I worked in the World Trade Center in the Navy officer recruiting office.
Wow.
Where they grab. So, and I worked there for my brother as a clerk in the summers. So, I mean, it was a big deal to me and then, there was a guy I knew from the Marine Corps who died. He worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. And being a New Yorker and having worked there, that was a big deal for me. And my brother survived both bombings. I actually was trying to get into work. It took me 3 hours to get in the gate at Nellis where I was.
Yeah.
And that I heard they collapsed on the radio. And I remember going, well, shit, my brother's dead. I got to figure out how to tell mom this later. You know what I mean? Because, but turns out he had gotten out.
Thank goodness.
So that happens. And, we got right in the war. And it sounds bad, but for me personally, the war was the best thing that ever happened to me because we deployed. We were flying right away. I built up I set up our operations in Kandahar, and I was able to wheel and deal and steal and do everything we could to set up our operation. And we were able to start flying operational missions, within 24 hours of being told we were moving up there. So
What aircraft?
just our H-860Gs. I'm sorry. I'm rambling. So
No, that was good. Keep going.
he flew H-3s in the Navy for a little while because when I was in the PI, there was a maintenance problem with the 53, so they were grounded for like almost a year. So we flew the H-3. A couple of the helo guys got qualified in the scooter because we were a composite squadron. We had helos and H-4s.
Oh yeah.
And a couple of the helo guys got NATOP rides in the scooter. They stopped doing that by the time I got there.
Too bad.
Came back when I got out of the Navy and got in the Army Guard. I just flew Hueys, H model Hueys, which was awesome. I mean, it's like a classic helicopter. Yeah. Then when I went to the Air Force, I flew the H-860G Pavehawk, which is just a modified version of the Black Hawk. We have internal tanks, another 2,000 pounds of tanks we can AR, and we have all the ALQ and all the other stuff to keep us from getting shot down. Meanwhile, like my British friend told me when he was in Ireland, that they would just wait till they landed and they would just fling bricks and they would go into the rotor disc and 2 helicopters done right there. They said a bunch of kids would just come. And he goes, we used to worry about getting shot at. He goes, it was nothing. We'd land in the LZ. It's about 4 or 5 kids, just arc some bricks in. They just come right through the rotor disc and boom, now you have 2 Lynx helicopters out of commission.
That sucks.
I always like that story just because I thought the money we spend on.
Yeah, technology defeating stuff, and all it takes is a simple rock or brick.
Right. Or the wrong rock to go through, or a pebble to go through the intake.
Yeah. All right, so you go overseas after 9/11, and so you said this ended up being good for you. Did it help you get promoted, or you just got?
Yeah, eventually I got promoted. I think my line number was 7. I think my line number was 7. I got promoted above the zone just because of the stuff I did. I mean, I flew a couple of good missions. I was co-pilot to a guy. They gave him the Silver Star, so they had to give us stuff. So everybody else, I got a DFC, and the other guys the guys in the back got air medals.
Cool.
But mainly, I think what got me promoted is I'm kind of a wheeler dealer. Use my New York stuff to make deals, and we had a lot of cool gear that we could trade with people. Like we had all these really nice Gerber switchblades, and we had a lot of off-the-shelf, because the Air Force, kind of a bastard stepchild in the helo world in the Air Force, right? I mean, it's night and day from the Navy. You know what I mean? I mean, night and day from the Navy. So I've had 06s come up to me, look at me, go, are those Air Force wings? Yeah. We have helicopters in the Air Force. I'm not lying to you. I'm not making that up. I mean, that is the honest to God truth. So you're a little bit of a bastard stepchild. So we were able to buy a lot of cool stuff off the shelf, like cold weather gear. And so we had a lot. So I would trade with our Canadian friends or the Army or whoever. And, I was kind of if you read Catch 22, I was a little bit of a Milo Minderbinder type of character. Not so much, I didn't trade with the Taliban like he did with the jet, but I mean, I just could figure out a way to get stuff done. And so I was able to set up a lot of operations. I could figure out how many nipper shipper lines we needed based on our footprint, and then I could ask realistic questions from the engineers, and the folks who were supporting us. So I got pretty good at that. And my bosses liked that they could send me somewhere as an advon or somewhere, and I could set up an operation, because we operated in like 3 ship detachments, so 2, 3 to make 2. And, we go with that many aircraft, that many maintenance personnel, that many. So depending on where we would get sent, I would go ahead and say, okay, this is what we're going to need to be able to operate out of here, bare bones, and still be able to communicate back to higher headquarters. because we were always geographically separated from any kind of high, just because we would have to be forward. So you'd have to have a good handle on that. So I got good at that. I got good at liaising with the hosts or the sister services because I could speak the language of most other services, and just I wouldn't alienate them. Like some of, I've been in situations where, they tell you, okay, they're going to support you. Like when we showed up at Kandahar, the Army had just taken over from the Marines, and we show up and they're basically like, who the F are you guys? We're like, we're Air Force Rescue. And the guy I was with, the 04, he's basically telling this Army 05, not understanding the different stature that an Army 05 has than an Air Force 05 has because of the level of responsibility and just the job he's doing. He's kind of like putting a finger in the guy's chest saying, you're supposed to support us and this, that, and the other. And I could see this wasn't going to go well. So I kind of said, hey, why don't you worry about setting up the base? Let me go talk to these guys. I can talk the grunt language and grunt and groan. And I did. And I kind of made nice with that colonel. And then he put me with his supply guy who happened to be a guy from New York, so we just hit it off. And then I was able to just work that. It worked out well. But I learned, how to schmooze people the right way so you don't piss them off, because it's easy to show up somewhere and start pissing people off. So I got good at that. I was never known for my diplomacy, but I seem to be able to work that well. And, that my commanders liked it. My bosses liked it. So they managed to get me promoted. I know how the system works. They had to write the stuff to say, look, yes, this guy's above the zone, but here's what he's done. And here's why he needs to be an 04. And I made an 04, and I knew that was as far as it was going to go. And that was fine. I actually, if you must know, being a passed over major is probably the best rank in the military, because you're kind of bulletproof. You're not worried about getting promoted. So, and especially in our environment where we were deployed so much, I just felt like I was very mission oriented. I wasn't, I was I guess I'm a bit of a dichotomy. I thought the war was for my own personal entertainment, but I also was serious about our mission. I just wasn't serious about E8s and E9s harassing my guys over minor uniform violations. And so being a passed over guy, you could be a little more aggressive in telling people to leave your folks alone and do this, because my boss would just go, well, he's passed over. What do you want me to do? I can't send him home. Yeah. And because he was on board with that too, but he just had to play the game.
Right.
So, and when he would get a call about me, he'd be like, well, he's passed over. He's going to retire in 2 years. And he's a good pilot. What do you want me to do? Yeah. I can't send him home. I'm short pilot, so it worked out good. And I spent 13 and a half years, the timing was right or wrong, however you want to look at it. Basically, the first couple of years in the Air Force, we deployed to Northern and Southern Watch. I'm sure you're familiar with those. Did rescue alert there. It was a lot of fun. Got to do some really interesting flying, especially in Turkey, right on the border. We landed at a Turkish base, sit alert while they're going out. We watched the Cobras shoot up the PKK, where their medevac birds were coming with the wounded. We're basically in the middle of a war zone, watching them fight their internal war while we're sitting there 5 miles from the Iraqi border, waiting for, the aircraft to come back over the fence when the ATO day. And that was fun. And then 9/11 happened, and we were what's known as a high demand, low density asset. So we were on a 1-to-1 dwell. We'd do 120 days, and you'd be gone 120 days, and then you'd be back on the road 100. So for me, it worked out perfect. I spent nearly a decade. I think I've got about 37 months deployed out of 7 years, in 120-day increments, maybe a little more, a little less, depending. But so for me, it was great. I mean, we flew. I got to fly the great. Look, combat search and rescue is the greatest mission out there, bar none. There's nothing better than save. I'm in the triple digits in terms of lives saved. I have no problem bragging about that. I'm very, very happy about that. I still kind of do that for a living now, and I mean, there's no. It is no higher calling, in my opinion, than to go out there and bring your brothers and sisters home, and being able to do that was a gift, man. The whole thing was a gift to me, honest. I served with the coolest people. I wouldn't trade anything. It was, like I said, I've had an interesting and highly undistinguished military career, but it was fun.
Well, that's why you're here. This is wow, this is amazing. So, first off, thanks for that story. That was amazing. So, in the end, you have an active duty retirement, right?
I retired with 22 years active duty, 28 years total with my guard, my broken service guard and reserve time. But yeah, I'm a retired major. Yeah, my little Air Force ID card.
Yeah.
I mean,
you said the term DD-214 earlier, and so for those who might watch this later and don't know what that means, that is, tell me if I'm wrong here, a summary of your military service, like where you served, what awards you received, where you deployed, and what you've done. Mine is pretty simple. I did almost 25 years in the Navy, did a couple, like you said, Southern Watch, and then they changed the name of it to Iraqi Freedom and then New Dawn. A couple other things. Yogi, what does your DD-214 look like? It must be several pages.
Well, I have 3 of them. I have one from the Marine Corps, one from the Navy. The Guard doesn't give you a DD-214. They give you a summary of service, right? But I have 3 DD-214s. So I have one from the Navy, one from the Marine Corps, one from the Navy, and one from the Air Force. My Air Force one obviously has the most stuff on it. It's got like, what is it? 15 years, whatever months.
Yeah.
Just lists awards, decorations, stuff like that. I've got them on they're on file. I break, I've had to break them out for certain jobs, but look, like I said, I mean, I'm not a shoot, if I'm honest, I was happy to be in the same room with the people I worked with because I was an average guy. I give my military career a C if I had to grade it, but I was with some really, I've witnessed a lot of really grave things, and I'm privileged to work with the PJs and the backenders who would get in the helicopter with a schmuck like me in the front driving around at night, 50 feet, one rotor disc on goggles and shitty weather, and they would get on board and trust me to get them home. Is amazing to me. And then the PJs who would do that, and then, in the middle of a firefight, just be like, yeah, just sure, put us in, we're good. And I'm like, well, let me try to get in there without getting us shot up first. And then they get in there, and I had guys like, leave me here. We had one guy, it's a former special forces. A lot of the PJs come from other places like Marine Recon, a couple of SEALs, we had one guy who was former special forces. One night we land, picking up some wounded, and it's chaotic. This is during Operation Anaconda. And apparently, according to this guy, he gets there and the platoon commander is in the fetal position, like and so this guy decides, he gets the wounded to the helicopter. He tells the pilot, I'm going to stay here and take over this platoon and fight until you guys come back later. We're like, I was in the 2 aircraft. This is happening in the lead aircraft. And we're hearing this on the internal. And of course, the pilot of the other aircraft, my buddy Ed, goes, get your ass in the goddamn helicopter. We're getting out of here. But these are the kind of guys, I mean, I could sit here and tell you PJ stories for hours. A guy took one to the chest in his vest, right? And the aircraft's about to take off. And he's like, hey, sir, can you wait 10 seconds? I just took a round to the chest and I want to find it so I can keep it as a souvenir and put it on a chain. Now, this is in the middle of, this is the middle of a fight, but he's like, I just want to get out of the aircraft for a second to see if I can find it. Luckily, it was in his vest. Like it was it was between the material and the ceramic. So he was able to recover it and make a necklace out of it. But I mean, these are kind of stuff, everybody else is screaming like a schoolgirl, and these guys are like, yeah, just hoist me in or just do, and you're just like, oh, and there's just never, what's crazy? I've been in a couple of those war movie situations where flight lead goes, look, guys, if we do this, there's a good chance we're going. I mean, can I use 4-letter words on that?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
No, I mean, our flight lead one day where this stern Operation Anaconda, they're like, hey, the aircraft would get shot off all day off the LZ. Will you guys try to get the wounded out? So we're, he's like, yeah, sure, we'll give it a shot. And he calls us, it was like out of a movie. He's like, listen, there's a good chance if we do this, we're going to get fucked up. Does anybody not want to go? And I remember thinking, well, I kind of don't want to go, but
I'm not going to say
looking around, right.
Everybody,
I'm looking around and nobody's saying anything. And I'm like, well, I guess we're going. I mean, and people ask me that all the time, like, what makes you do stuff? And I'm like, honestly, it's just peer pressure. It's simple. You don't want to look like a pussy. So you're like, I guess I'm going, and then you go, and it's very cliche. Training takes over, and just, it's muscle memory. You're just doing what you're trained to do. And that's outside kind of noise, and you just handle it. And then as you think about it later, and how people deal with fear is kind of interesting. I kind of used to watch how different people deal with it. And, the way I dealt with it is like, aviation is good. Aviation's really good at doing one thing. Teaches you to deal with the things you can deal with, checklists, emergency procedures, tactics. That. So those are the things you control. The stuff you can't control, I felt was a waste of time to give a lot of brain bites to. Because if you did, you'd make yourself catatonic. So I was just like, okay, this is what I can do. If some dude gets lucky and shoots me in the face with an RPG, I got nothing. I leave what I can to the man upstairs. I mean, I'd always say a little prayer, and I'd be like, hey, it's up to you. And I'm not a super religious guy, and my relations with the big man have always been informal, so I'm just like, hey, I leave it up to you. This is what I can do. And that's what helped me. I'm not a particularly brave guy, but that's how I dealt with it. And a lot of it is just your buddies, and then it's just your friends. You're just not going to leave your friends, or you're not going to. The problem is we would get calls, and it's going to be bad where you're going, and or you have crappy weather in between, or all these challenges, tactical problems, you want to call them. And of course you're scared. Of course you'd rather not leave the movie you're watching to go do this. But there's a guy out there, you're his last hope. If you don't go, no one's going to try. And so basically my thing was, how dare you think you shouldn't go when that guy's laying out there, maybe bleeding out or trying to evade the enemy. And we know that it's not going to go well if he's captured, or all the different scenarios I've situations I've been in. So you just go, and at some point, I'm a big movie fan. Like they say in The Godfather, this is the life we've chosen. You know what I mean? I mean, I chose this, and so.
The only thing I would add, Yogi, I think you're right about all of that. The only other thing I would add is just flat out denial. Like, well, this ain't going to happen to me. Yeah, I'm scared.
Oh, everybody thinks it's not going to happen.
Exactly. Right. So that's the best coping mechanism ever is, oh, yeah, it sucks and we're going to get shot up, but not me. He will, or he will.
Yeah. And also a lot of it is too, after a while, and this was difficult for me to come to terms with, because I had some difficulties in transition, and this was part of it. I grew up in New York, very liberal. I grew up, my mom, typical Jewish mom, wanted a doctor or a lawyer. And I was like, that's not happening. I'm letting you know early that that's not happening, but I actually liked it. I enjoyed being downrange. I enjoyed the job. I can tell you, coming back from flying all night with the sun coming up and you're landing, then the people, because we did a lot of support for some of the special operations units out there. We would go out and kind of, we were there, 911 if something went south on their head or whatever. And, you come back from a mission, the sun's coming up, you're getting your gear out of the helicopter, throwing it in the truck. The helos with the shooters are coming in, the SEALs or Rangers or whoever pick one was on the, was doing the shooting that night there with their legs hanging out, waving at you when they fly by, then they land and they got their prisoners and the dogs trying to bite the prisoners and, and they're waving, hey, what's up? What's going on? And then, the Navy was out there doing that HCS guys were out there and the little birds would come in. And there were mornings where I was like, man, this is I can't believe they're paying me. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but here right now. And intellectually, most people think that's a crazy thing, but it was. And it took me a long time to come to terms with that. Like, I'm hesitant to use the word warrior or whatever, but I know that I picked the right profession for those near 30 years of my life, and just like guys are firemen or even if a guy's a lawyer, a investment banker, for me, that was the right profession and I loved it. And
rightfully so, Yogi. I mean, it's more than just something you're doing that's got a lot of adrenaline and risk. There's this nobility part of it. I mean, you're part of something larger than yourself. You're part of this patriotic force, cue the music and wave the flags, but I'll go there anyway. You're part of something larger and you've got this brotherhood that you can't find anywhere else. And I would say, I haven't experienced, I don't think exactly what you're talking about, but something close. And I miss that more than anything else. I mean, I do my airline job now. I put on my stupid tie. I show up, I say hello and goodbye to the people now with a mask on. And it's nothing like that. And you can't find that anywhere else.
No, it's I'm heavily involved in a couple of groups, Rebel Warriors and merging vets and players. I'm trying to organize a Silky's hike here in Vegas in December. Invitation out to you. Basically put on your little Ranger panties or your little old PT shorts, combat boots, and we hike 22 clicks. We're going to do it along the strip. It's to raise awareness of veteran suicide. And, the biggest thing when I retired, it's the camaraderie. It's the wardroom. It's the guys in your squadron. It's the laugh, I'm sure you'll agree that if you look back on your military career, and most people, when I say this, they kind of look at me sideways, that you remember immediately prior to the laughter, the funny things that happen on crews or just things that happen or how you got your call sign or whatever, how you guys just tortured each other, those are the things that come to mind. And those things are just impossible. They are completely impossible to replicate in the civilian world. And I'm man enough to admit that's caused me some real problems, both on a personal level and even in my job, working with other folks. I'm used to speaking to people a certain way, and because of the way I spent 30 years in the military, like, if you say to me, if we're doing something, let's say I'm your co-pilot, or your first officer, and I'm doing something wrong, and you said, Yogi, man, get your head out of your ass and unfuck yourself. I'm going to go, okay, sorry, Jello. Yeah. And I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to be like, I can't believe he spoke to me that way. And I deal with that now because I'm 59. I'm not changed, and I'm becoming an anachronism, and I find myself in these little conflicts at work where I have to talk to my boss about stuff. And I'm like, why are we having this discussion? He's like, because it may not bother me. It may not bother you. But it bothers that person. I'm like, well, why do we have to accommodate everybody's, I get it, and I know it's not right, but it's just the way
we have a certain disability, Yogi, having led the lives we led, because I do the same thing. I try to crack a certain joke with my wife or kids, and I'll laugh and I'll open my eyes, and they're just looking at me like, you're,
my kids, unfortunately, my wife and I we were sort of in same residence separation, I guess I call it. We're in the same. So, well, my kids, and they're grown, and I got grandkids. My kids just like they find nothing I do or say even remotely funny. But
I do.
yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
My grandkids love it.
Yeah.
But
If they're young about it, I do.
yeah, but it's just it's difficult, and I think kind of said what one of the problems with I think veteran suicide is probably, if I had to guess, is missing the camaraderie, missing, especially in a combat environment, or even an environment on the boat in a non-combat environment. It's so intense. The risks are so severe. You become super close. The friendships are, and when you're not doing that anymore, you're like, man, what's it all? You get like, what's it all about? What's
Nothing else compares.
nothing compares to it.
Yeah.
It's like, look, I'm not a fighter guy. I haven't slammed it, but I've flown to the boat at night, free goggles off the coast of the Philippines when it's darker than 3 feet up a cow's ass trying to, I almost landed to 3 Banca boats because they look like the lights of the ship.
Oh, dang.
But, because I was landing on a small boy, and I'm like, oh, there it is. I'm good. And till the tower flower was like wave off, wave off, wave off, because he said the water was starting to come above the rotor disc because I was flying a perfect approach to the Pacific Ocean. And the guy I was flying with was too busy smoking a cigarette because
For heaven's sake.
they had the ashtrays in the helicopters and stuff. And this guy was an old 04, and he's just, and I mean, typical naval aviation horror story, man. You almost fly a perfectly good airplane running the ocean.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's and I'll tell you, everybody asks me, what'd you like the best and blah blah blah, and I'm not saying this because you and I are talking. I love the Marine Corps. For me, I needed that. I was the perfect candidate who needed the kind of Marine Corps discipline, and OCS was a little different in the sense that physically it was tougher because you had to lead from the front. So the PT, and they, like, what did one of my prior enlisted guys say? He goes, the PT's tougher and they don't beat the shit out of you as much because they could still put their hands on you a little bit and stuff. All my drill instructors have been to Vietnam because I joined in 81, so it's still only a decade, from the end of, and so they'd all been to Vietnam, and it was, but I needed it. But as an aviator, I'm very glad I was a naval aviator, of course. And I argue with the Air Force guys all the time about it. They're like, oh, our flight training is meant to be, because the Air Force has this attitude like they're the only ones who really understand aviation. Everybody else is a dilettante. Like the Navy and Marine Corps dilettantes, the Army, they fly helicopters. Those are whatever contraptions, and I'm just like, no, actually, naval aviation's pretty hard. They just, what I like is the Navy will take a guy with no science background, no nothing, and turn him into an aviator, which I think is great. The Air Force is like, well, we'd like engineers and we'd like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, I know a guy who's an F-18 pilot who has a degree from Juilliard in New York, okay? He was some sort of music virtuoso, and he went to Juilliard, and all of a sudden he said, fuck this, I want to be a Navy pilot. And he ended up becoming an F-18 pilot, and I love that. I was a history major, and I love flight school. Like, this is a fuselage. This isn't it. And I the Air Force doesn't do that. They're like, we expect you to be, and I'm so glad I was a naval aviator. And I always wore my Navy wings, and it used to piss the Air Force guys off because I would wear them. And I would say, well, look, here's the deal. I earned these and you gave me these.
There you go.
I'm like, you gave me these by virtue of the fact that I earned these. So I'm all like blues all the time, and getting my wings was still one of the proudest days of my life. I mean, just my brother slammed them into my, with no backing. I have a picture of my wife.
Back when you could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, it's one of the proudest days of my life, and they look better. They're the coolest looking wings without a doubt, you know.
I'm biased, but I agree.
And I I'm really glad, you know. And if the Navy had the mission that, like, here's typical Navy. I wanted to go tar when it was getting time to get out. I asked my boss. I said, I'd like to be a tar, right? And you know, you're familiar with that. It's like where you go to the reserves and where you're a full timer.
They call it FTS now, full time salary.
Yeah. So, and of course, he's like, no, that you don't want to do that. That's horrible for your career and blah blah. I'm thinking to myself, but I kind of do want to do that.
Yeah.
And then the unit at Norfolk, you know, was flying helicopters. They were doing the special warfare mission, working with the SEALs, and they were getting the new Hawks. And I'm like, no, I kind of want to do that. He's like, no, it's horrible for your career, and I'm not gonna support that, and blah 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 blah. You know, and so I didn't end up doing it. You know what I mean? But it just goes to show you, had I been able to do that, I'd have never left.
Yeah. Well,
You know what I mean?
a lot different.
You know, and but the Air Force is the same way. You know, if you want to just be a guy who wants to stay in the cockpit and do that, you know, that's the biggest retention issue. It isn't deployments. It isn't time away from home. It's that guys don't want to be doing all this other bullshit. Now, at least in the Navy, you were getting leadership. You know, if you were a division officer, you're getting leadership. You're getting experience. You know, you're working. You learn how to deal with the troops and the administrative aspect of it. You know, because I was in the Philippines, I spent so much time getting my guys out of Filipino jails. You know, and my goal was to do it without paperwork. You know, get guys back on the base. I just didn't want guys to get jammed up, you know, but the Air Force doesn't, you don't have the difference in the Air Force. A guy's not going to have a solid leadership position until he's an 04 or an 05.
Yeah.
You know, where you're getting it in the Navy or anywhere else as show up as a new get to a squadron. You're like, oh, hey, you're the avionics division officer.
Yeah.
You know, good line shit about it. Okay, chief, what do I do? Yeah. And just say, so just sit in the meeting. I'll tell you when to talk. You know,
sign the bottom line, all the paperwork.
I just sign this.
Yeah, exactly.
I do most of the talking. Nod your head if I need you to. You know, and you're like, okay, because you don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Not at first. Yeah. Oh man, Yogi, you are a character. You know, we call this Happy Hour, and I see you've got something with you. It looks like a pellet vino, man. Okay. I've got a belching beaver. So I don't know if you're a bad drinker, but it's an IPA. I forgot to do that at the beginning, but cheers, by the way.
Cheers, man. Listen, I don't drink there's no really good story beyond it other than at this point, booze gives me heartburn.
No, yeah.
I just don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
You know, or I'd love to tell you some great story about why I had to stop drinking.
No, it's all.
But it's just like, it gives me heartburn now.
All right, so 2 other questions, and we can go a little longer, but it's almost been an hour. The first one is a simple one. So how many hours military, and then add on top of that whatever you're doing? Wow.
So I'm at about a little over 5,000 hours. Probably left the military with about 35-ish.
All right. Yeah.
Maybe 3,000. I did okay. You know, I did okay. I learned in the civilian world, though, that like guys get 3,000 hours in 2 years flying tours in the Grand Canyon and stuff, but it's not real flying.
No.
They think it is.
Neither is the airline thing I'm doing. We're not that. Anyone who says, "Oh, I have 10,000 hours at the airlines,"
What do you fly?
The 757 and the 767.
Okay, can you tell me who you fly for, or is that it?
Delta.
Okay.
You know, we're not supposed to make a big deal out of it, but they prefer to manage their.
My buddy's at Delta. He's been at Delta for a long time. Howie Elmer. He's a Navy guy. We flew together. He was an H3 guy and then became a station pilot. Got all his fixed wing time, and he's been at Delta probably 20 years now.
Yeah. No, it's a good company. I'm waiting to see if the other shoe's going to drop on October 1st and get furloughed or not. But anyway, the other question I had for you, Now, you weren't really in the quote unquote real army, but as you look at all the services that you served in, give me like an elevator speech summary of like each one, right? Like the Marine Corps is this, the Air Force is this.
Well, I mean, you can't go wrong in the Marine Corps. You know, the Marine Corps is the Marine Corps, you know, and that's what's great about it. They haven't changed, and, you know, they taught change, but a Marine's a Marine, and I'm thankful, and earning the title Marine is, again, another great accomplishment that I'll always be proud of. Um, I like the Navy. I still like ships, and I like being at sea, but I kind of like the Navy, and I like tradition. So I like I like the traditions of the Navy. I like, you know, I tell people the Navy is a fighting organization. They're not and they emphasize fighting. It's just that unfortunately in the Navy, the guys who do the fighting are again in the minority. But the Navy is a fighting organization. You fight your shit. You know, I tell people, remember that Iranian thing where they took the sailors prisoner and the guy with the team, you know, and I'm like, that lieutenant should be court-martialed. They're like, what are you talking? I'm like, listen. He goes, those are little patrol boats. I'm like, the United States Navy warship.
That's right.
And he surrendered them without even considering a fight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, his job is and people, I got in huge arguments with guys. I'm like, his job is first of all, he wasn't smart enough to make sure they were watching so they could tell the ships were approaching him. 2, he should have had the guns, man. And 3, he should have said, we're not coming with you. Let's do it. Yeah. And if they got sunk, they got sunk. But he's a naval officer, and that's his job. And I said he's going to go down as a coward in the Navy. His career is over, and and people can't believe it. They're like, no, he did the right thing. He prevented an international incident. And I'm like, bullshit. When he was turned over to United States, and I'm like, they're like, where, you know, the guy's like, why do you think like that? I'm like, that's what the Navy taught me.
That's right.
You know what I mean? That's what the Navy taught me. Is that you are an officer, you are a naval officer, you are a leader. You know, and so I mean, took a little long way, but you know, the Navy was great. I enjoyed the Army. I think it's cool. It was kind of it was a way to stay flying. It wasn't my cup of tea. I don't think the Army really takes care of it. People say the Marine Corps treat you bad. I think the Army treats their people like shit and worse most of the time. But the Guard was fun just because of the group of people I was around. You know, I wouldn't have wanted to be an Army aviator, being gone for 12 months, getting extended to 15 months and all that. I mean, I still got to go to combat, and I didn't have to I still spent 3+ years away from home, but in shorter spurts. So, and the Air Force gave me the opportunity to fly a great mission. And I consider myself in the fighting part of the Air Force. The Air Force as a whole, despite the fact that I spent most of my time there, I didn't love it. I love the mission and the people I was around. I didn't like because the Air Force mentality was more corporate. The military, you know, they used a lot of terms that I hated, like management versus leadership, synergy.
Yeah.
I just, you know, so I felt, no, you're not a manager, you're a leader. And I learned those things in the Navy and the Marine Corps. That's where I learned to be a leader and what it takes, take care of your troops, you know, and those things I learned, and the Air Force is short on that, you know. General McPeak, someone should have shot him when he was a lieutenant, because I don't mean that for real.
I was going to say, that's a dangerous thing to say, buddy.
I mean, no, but he is a guy, like, he was the guy who decided the Air Force needs to be more corporate, and they wanted to have an airline style uniform. And he pulled from the corporate world as his way of managing the force. And I think that did a lot of damage. And I think it took these 2 wars to get the Air Force back to a fighting organization. And I'll encapsulate it like this. In the 60s, in like a strategic air command base, it would say the mission of the United States Air Force is to fly, fight, win, period. Nothing else, right? Up until recently, to Gunfight or his predecessor, or Schwartz, the Air Force mission was like a 3-paragraph, to win superiority in the air and space and cyber and blah, blah, blah. No, it's to fly, fight, and win. The Marine Corps, I still remember it. The mission of the Marine Rifle Squad is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire or close. I mean, it's great that we try to fight war in the most humanitarian way possible, but what is our job in the military is to be the fist of our leader, of our nation, when politics and diplomacy fails.
Right.
And that's to do extreme violence on the other person.
Yeah.
I don't like when we don't face that fact. I don't like when we make it.
I think that
Anyway, I'm a knuckle dragger. I apologize.
you're awesome, man. You're awesome. I think that's a much deeper subject we could go into on, are we as a country and a society changing, and the things that are important or not. And I have heartburn on a lot of that. But all right, man. Well, so I want to be respectful of your time. I'm going to ask you one final question. All right. So you're 59. I'll be 50 next month. I mean, this is a young man's game, but hypothetically, hey, we need people. Yogi, you got to come back. Here are 4 doors. Each door, hold on now. Each door leads to one of the services. Inside that door is the uniform, the training, and an aircraft that you can go fly. Which door are you walking through? Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine?
It's a tough one because I know the mission I did in the Air Force, and that I would go back to that mission tomorrow.
That's a good answer.
I kind of regret not being, and this is silly, I regret not going to combat as a Marine.
All right, so you could bring it full circle.
Yeah.
All right.
But the mission, I'd probably go back to what I did because that mission is so important and it's so meaningful to me, quite frankly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's saving lives. I mean, I'm not a pacifist by any means, but nor am I particularly bloodthirsty, but to save the lives of the people, the caliber of the people I serve with, and the caliber of the people that I've met, that I have gotten out of the shit. You're just like, wow, this person may do something someday, I've met the smartest, the most brilliant people I've ever met in the military. And I know people who went to Harvard, to Brown, to this. I have friends who were, I've been exposed to some, I'm an actor now. That's what I'm trying to do now that I'm retired, when I'm not flying for a living. And I've just met some brilliant, really interesting people. The most brilliant, interesting people I met wear the uniform, the cloth of the nation. And people don't believe me when I say that. And the opportunity to serve with those people again, you could pick it for me. The only one I really wouldn't want to go back to is the Army, unless I can go to the 160th. But anywhere else, if you told me, hey man, you're back on the carrier in a squadron tomorrow, cool.
Let's go.
And yeah,
Awesome. Yogi, you are a hero, and I
not a hero at all.
Well, I know. Would you thought
just a very lucky dude.
You're a hero to me because you've shared this hour with me, and I've learned so much. But you are your own biggest critic.
It's been an honor to talk to you, man.
Yeah, well,
yes. I want to hear your story, man. I want to talk to you about flying F-18s and some of your stories. I bet they're my stories. Listen, let me tell you this, I am a lucky guy. I've been blessed to be able to do what I've done and serve with the people I've served with. And I was lucky to just be there.
And we're still doing it now, right? So you're doing rescue stuff now, is that right?
I'm an EMS pilot. It's a lot tamer than you think. It's taking people from generally one hospital where in Yuma to Phoenix for a higher level of care. Sometimes we do scene calls where we'll go to a car accident or something, or usually because Yuma's so isolated, they tend to bring the traumas to the hospital and we transfer them from the hospital. And I've worked all over the country doing that. It's not as exciting as it seems, but it pays the bills.
But you're still serving. I mean, you are serving.
I do it because of the schedule, Jello. It's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and it's the only job where you can get paid to take a nap because you sit around. It's like being on alert 5. You know, you're just sitting around waiting for something to happen. I catch up on all my shows. I have a consulting job where I do safety consulting for the Air Force. I do that, and I audition on Zoom for parts now. I mean, it's the coolest job. I still get to fly. Wiggling the sticks is great, and I'll probably fly until. I mean, it doesn't suck yet. You know, it beats getting a real job. So I don't know.
Well, since I named my company earlier, I won't comment on napping in our line of work. But anyway, so all right, Yogi, you've been awesome. Well, let's keep in touch. This is really cool. And
Ed, definitely. I'll keep in touch on Instagram. I'll look you up on Facebook. And I tried to find you the other day because I posted this video of this hawk attacking a model airplane.
Oh, I saw that.
I had
Cool.
I tried to find it because I posted. I said I listed all my friends who are fighter pilots, you know, and I'm friends with that guy Rob Caravallo who runs Ocean Tropic Airways. Runs those caravan seaplanes. He used to be an F-18 guy.
Oh, cool.
Now he runs that airline, and you know, just all my fighter pilot friends. I'm like, what do you guys think?
Awesome.
Everybody sent me comments. Should have stayed in the turn. Shouldn't have reversed, you know, blah, blah, blah. So it's awesome.
You can count on those remarks from groups like us. Absolutely.
What? Oh, no, I was great because I was like, because the guy was trying to fight. He was trying to get away. You could tell the guy flying it was trying to get away, but that bird was relentless.
Well, they've got trained birds now, anti-drone and remote control stuff. So awesome. All right, man. Well, let's wrap this up, but I know we're going to keep in touch, and thanks so much. You're a
Great talking to you, man, and I love the podcast. It's cool stuff, man. It really is. I love it, so keep doing it.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Fighter Pilot Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I sure do every time. Now, in case we had some jargon there you didn't understand, go on over to fighterpilotpodcast.com where we have a glossary as well as musings, which are just our blogs, and some cool merchandise that you can check out as well. So we'll see you next time here on the Fighter Pilot Podcast. So long.